Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the co-founder of Rise Modern Wellness, Garrett Ahlberg. Garrett, how are you today?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you on, Garrett. So let's talk about what Rise Modern Wellness is and how the whole concept originated.
Really, Rise is just, if we were to boil it down into one sentence, it's just the idea that we use modern technology to elicit a wellness response in humans. So what does that mean exactly? You know, there's been massage that's been around for a long time. Chiropractic's been around for a long time. These are one-to-one human environments where, you know, a human is doing the service on the individual. With modern technology, we continue to expand upon like how we can actually affect someone's biochemistry and improve their health overall. And so really our bread and butter is using equipment to elicit that response in a human. And it could be a multi-variety type of response. It could be in relation to helping with inflammation. It could be in relation to helping with better sleep, etc. And so at the core, again, we put people in, equipment or machinery that helps with that response. So we put people in whole body cryotherapy. The cryotherapy unit does the service on the individual, right? We put people in an infrared sauna. The infrared sauna does the service on the individual, and so on and so forth. It's kind of, to a T, who we are and what we're not. Like, so we're not a massage brand, we're not chiropractic or any one-to-one human interaction type service.
Okay, so Garrett, you have the different modalities. So cryotherapy and the red light therapy, did I hear you say?
Yeah, so we're actually encompassing of 12 unique modalities, all under one roof. Okay. And so that can be a variety of things from whole body cryotherapy, infrared saunas, IV therapy, body contouring, dry salt therapy. The list keeps going down from there. And again, it's innovative technology that we can put you in and help. And by the time you're done with that session, you feel immensely better. So for example, like PMF is one of our services. You lay on a mat and it uses pretty much magnetism, to keep it short, to effectively train your cells and dial them into almost like recharging your cells, like a battery, if you will. And so, we're using modern technology to really elicit that wellness response that you really just can't get anywhere else outside of this.
So Garrett, I'm always curious to know on how people started, like what prompted this. So would you share with the audience, your wife Rachel's, unfortunately, the chronic nerve pain she went through and inflammation that kind of led to all this?
Yeah. So you have to rewind about a decade ago, actually. My wife and I met at the University of Texas. She was a competitive runner there, ended up overtraining and just a ton of pain down her right side, fractured her sacrum. We tried for 4 straight years, anything out there. You name it, chiropractic, massage, all the stuff I just kind of listed, right? And nothing really helped the way we had wanted. And when you have someone that was an elite athlete, could run super long distances, to go from that to barely walking upstairs. We lived in an apartment at the time, which you could barely walk up the stairs to the second floor of the apartment. You're willing to do anything and everything to try and help that human get out of pain at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It was actually the only version of my wife that I knew. I didn't know her prior to this injury. And so it was like the only version I knew of Rachel was the in pain Rachel. And so it was a 4-year journey of trying to find what is that thing that's going to help at the end of the day. And so we were living in Eastern Tennessee in Knoxville at the time, going to grad school. And a buddy of mine calls me up out of the Dallas area, and he's like, hey, we're talking about Rachel and whatnot. And he's like, hey, have you tried cryo? And I'm like, what's cryo? I have no idea what this is. I had a background in, ex-phys, exercise physiology. I, helped train athletes at the University of Texas. That's actually kind of how I met Rachel. And so I understood ice baths and, kind of the whole science behind that. Right. But the whole idea of like, let's use this extreme cold to, mitigate inflammation to an even greater degree than like an ice bath. Again, when you're in pain, you're like, let's try it all, right?
Absolutely.
So I still remember it to this day. This was 2017 at the time. I get on Google, I do a Google search for this term, cryotherapy, like near me, right? Like anyone else. And there is one place, and it's the only place in a 300-mile radius in all directions, because cryo was very new at the time, is the only place, and it happened to be down the street from where we were living at the time.
Wow.
And it was the only one in all directions anywhere. So like, if this place didn't exist, like we definitely wouldn't have done it, right? And so again, when you're in pain, you willing to try anything. We go in, as you might imagine, even in the first session, she experiences some relief. Now, obviously, like, was it life-changing in one session? No. But like the fact that like in one session, like something actually did something, it's like we had tried so many things in the past. It didn't really feel like we were moving the needle on anything. And so we saw success with the one session. We're like, this is down the street. Like, let's go all in. Like, we know about consistency. Like, that matters. So over the next 5 months, we comboed cryotherapy with just regular strength training, which like she couldn't do at the time. She was just in so much pain. We did both together, and synergistically between the two is as if the injury never happened. To kind of bring all that together, we're like, we got to bring this to an area where it doesn't exist. And so obviously there's a much bigger story as to how we got into Central Oregon, but we wrapped up grad school in Eastern Tennessee, raised money from friends and family, drove across the country right after we graduated, 4 days, that is, to Central Oregon, where we felt like it was a promising market to launch this concept with cryo. We had no background. We had no business being in business. Honestly, our friends and family bought into us because we literally just finished a master's in business, but it's obviously very different. We started in 2018 in a brand new community, didn't know a soul. We thought we were like kind of an athletic recovery type brand, and we wanted to help people and whatnot, just like Rachel got help. And that was a really tough time, honestly. Like 2018 to like 2020, like very difficult in terms of like learning, like how do you acquire customers? Like what even is the brand? Like, what does the market want? Right. We foolishly and naively thought, oh, if you just build it, they'll just show up. Right. That's like, oh, that's not really how it works. So anyways, fast forward, we obviously start figuring things out. We learn things, we keep learning. The suite that we had got was a 3-year deal. And honestly, it was a blessing in disguise that it was a 3-year deal on this like side retail suite because, there's so many moments we wanted to quit. We were like, we're in this. Like, we are in this suite. Like, they didn't give us choice. Yeah, we're like, we have to keep going. So it's like when you're 18 months in, you're like seeing no record of success or anything like that. It's like it was the thing that kept us going, if you will, of like, we can't get out of this. Like, we have to just keep going. It was a blessing in disguise because we get to about the 2.5-year marker. And if you do the math there, 2018, 2.5 years, 2020, COVID, right? Everything gets shut down. We have our first daughter at that time. So I'm actually like literally in the hospital with my wife. I'm like, we're still scrapping, if you will. Like I'm looking up like local SEO tactics and whatnot. Like we're still on the grind, if you will, in the hustle.
Right.
After COVID opens up, after we reopened from COVID and stuff like that, honestly, it was like a hockey stick, almost as if like the market just like got it. It clicked for them, right? Of like, oh, I have to actually better my health. Like I have to actually take care of myself. And I'm sure there's a lot of health and wellness brands that would say the same thing in terms of like the customer perception of like, let me invest in my health. Radically changed. And so we got to the end of 2020 and we actually, we were coming to the end of that 3-year lease and we're like, is this it? Like, is this all we came out to do? And we had a golden opportunity. There was a Class A space right next to a Starbucks, it was anchored by a grocery store, whatever you have in your head of like a nice storefront. It was a nice space, right? It was just like in your face versus like we were in a side street, like within a suite of a dental office back in the day. And we're like, do we take the shot? Like, do we actually burn the bridges? Like, because we didn't invest in a build out or anything in the first space. And so we said, this is it. I think we got to do this. Like, we either do it or we don't. And like, we go back and like, it's not that exciting. If we were to just do another 3 years in our current space or whatever, not that exciting. So we said, all right, let's burn the ships. Fortunately, we had been on time with all of our payments to our friends and family. We said, hey, friends and family, we've been paying you the whole time. You guys want to come in on more? I think we're going to go do this. And they're like, sure. And so we signed a lease in 2020, which was obviously a steal of a deal for retail at the time. In 2021, that space got fully open. We rebranded actually as Rise. So in the first 3 years, we were not Rise. We were a totally different brand. And we got to learn our customer quite a bit, who they are, what they wanted. And we thought they wanted athletic performance. We thought they wanted recovery. What they actually wanted, it was just like it from a mass market perspective, it was people just wanted more energy. They wanted to sleep better. They wanted detoxification, not necessarily pigeonholing people only into athletic recovery or performance.
Right.
And so we're 3 years in and we're like, oh, we're not even the brand that we started out to be. So it was a perfect opportunity to fully rebrand. So we fully rebranded to Rise in 2021. And then, just continued to take off like a rocket ship. 2022 hits. We had a manager in place and we said, as all entrepreneurs do, what's next?
I want to hold off on franchising yet. Before we get there, we're going to talk all about Rise Modern's franchise side of things. When you guys, obviously you first got to Oregon, you didn't know anybody, you didn't know anything, right? You didn't know the location so well. Were you strictly cryotherapy? When did you start bringing the other modalities into your business, and how did you know which ones you wanted to bring in next?
In the beginning, it was what Garrett and Rachel liked. So obviously cryo was a big component. So we knew we were going to bring cryo in at the very beginning. And we had, while we were in Tennessee, mapping out what we were going to do. And as we moved to Oregon, we started interviewing some other, wellness concepts that were, out there. And we came across infrared sauna and compression boots is like really low barrier, ease of equipment, ease of access. So we actually started with three things: whole body cryo, infrared saunas, and compression therapy.
Okay.
And like we started there. And so then again, we morphed from what our customers wanted. From 3, we're done at 12, by the way, but from 3 to 12 over the next 3 years of, asking our customers ultimately, why are you here? What do you want out of this space? And we just got to learn and learn. And it's so funny because one of our biggest competitors, Restore Health Wellness, if you listen to the CEO in that podcast, he has a podcast that he shared info on. They were living the same world, and they have over 200 locations at this point. They were living in the same world that we were just 3 years earlier, meaning like they started out in athletic performance. They thought it was for recovery, and they're like, oh, no, same realization. And it's so funny because I didn't hear that podcast until, in hindsight of like, oh, we already learned all these things. Yeah. It's like, oh, same experience, totally different market, totally different area. And so it's like, yeah, it was just it was all validating of, rebranding, pretty much like giving the customer what they want at the end of the day.
And Garrett, that was a very valuable lesson that you learned and that you listened to, because too many entrepreneurs, the reason why so many businesses fail, besides the fact, they run out of money and they go in the wrong business and they can't execute, is that you had to pivot. You recognized that the business you thought you were in going into was vastly different on what your customers ultimately wanted. And by recognizing that, now suddenly you're introducing the other modalities, not just what you and Rachel thought were good modalities, but realizing that people ultimately, what do they really want? They wanted to feel better. Like you said, they wanted more energy. They wanted to sleep better. That being a little bit different from your original, thesis kind of changed the whole trajectory of the company. And the ability to pivot is so critical. It's so smart of you guys to realize that so early on, because it could have been the death knell of Rise Modern Wellness if you just stayed like, this is why we started the company. We're going for athletic performance, and this is what we're going to do. And that's why so many people fail, is they stay too committed to what they think that their business is about.
Yeah, it's honestly a 180 of like, hey, we started because, Rachel was in pain. We just wanted to help others with that passion.
Right.
And we have absolutely helped a sub-segment of the market. It's maybe 15% of the market. 85% is like, yeah, I want to like have the best night of sleep ever, which we absolutely can help with. So
right.
Yeah, it's been a blessing for sure.
So you moved to Central Oregon. I'm just kind of curious. Did you know the market, like the demographics of this market, to think that cryotherapy and infrared sauna is going to work here? Or did you just go, this is where we want to live and we're going to make the business work?
What's funny is it's technically both, but the first one came before, the second one, which is, in 2017, like you have to imagine cryo was still new. Honestly, it's still new today. And I'm sure we'll get into like just the industry in general a little bit. But, so there wasn't even a lot of these types of concepts even out there in 2017, right? And so we could open in a lot of spots, but we had familiarity with Bend. We've been to Bend one time in the past, believe it or not, but we realized that it was an outdoor mecca of the world, meaning like, you can ski here, you can snowboard, hike, climb, everything, right? So like athletes move here. Obviously, that was their thought process back in the day. Like, oh, athletes, like they're definitely all there. Obviously, again, in hindsight, that wasn't our target market. But that is why we moved to Bend. Primarily, because we believe the demographics made sense for what we thought at the time. And then B, obviously, it's an amazing place to live. Like there's days where it's 20-minute drive for me to go snowboard during winter. And so that's like my thing. And it's a great fit. And so yeah, honestly, I get to look back and I'm like, man, I'm super blessed that like I get to live out in Central Oregon and do all these different things and try all these different things. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we're building this company on location. Things are going well. We get through, things explode, like you said, outside of COVID. And now we get to the point where you guys are thinking, how am I going to expand this? So let's talk about the franchise journey itself. What was the defining moment of when you decided you're going to franchise? What prompted it?
Yeah, I would say it's two things, actually. Number one was the whole entrepreneur thing I talked about earlier, which is like the ADD of like, well, what's next? Like we had a full-time manager in place. Things are going well. And it's just like, we came back to just like we came back to at the end of the lease of like, the previous place of like, is this it? Is that all there is? And we asked the same question at the end of 2022, and we said, is this it? Like, is this all we're doing? Like, we had a great salary and everything, and like life was easy. Like 2022 was a very easy year for us.
Awesome.
I won't lie. And so one of it was like, well, what's next? Like we just kind of were hungry for challenge for one reason. But honestly, number two, and even bigger, was just the feeling unethical if we didn't take this move. Meaning the amount of stories, the amount of lives that were impacted, the amount of people that were radically transformed. And we kind of lost touch of that because we weren't in the stores anymore. Like, we had other people in there, but they would always come to us and be like, Brittany over here, or Susan over here, or Bradley over here. Like their life got, like, they were drinking, 5, Red Bulls a day. And like, they like were on E all the time. And like, they're like a completely different person. And we'd hear those stories over and over and over and over again. And we're like, okay, like we feel unethical if we just hold this here. Like that's actually what moved us forward, because we're like, oh, this is probably gonna be hard. Like this is probably gonna be hard. That's what gave us enough fuel to actually take the jump forward, and be like, all right, like let's do this. And so we had 2 routes, right? We could pick, we're gonna open more corporately on stores,
right?
Or are we gonna open franchise, right? There's kind of 2 methods of expansion, at least in the brick and mortar world, right?
Sure.
It's a question we get all the time, which is like, yeah, how did you choose the franchise route versus the manager, corporate owned stores route? And it goes back to how can we help more people faster? For us, it was less about the money. It's like, yeah, we can make way more money, obviously, by opening our own individual stores, like on a per store basis. But it wasn't really about that. It was like, can I do a value exchange with someone in Tampa, for example,
right,
and be like, hey, Frank, you go open in Tampa. Like, you can help all these people. And like, that's a win in our head. And like, I'll just take a small cut, aka a royalty, right? But it's like, that's just more important to us, is like, why we set out to even take the next step was like just to help people. And like our needs are already met, honestly. I tell honestly all of our candidates all this all the time. I tell our franchisees this all the time. And like, I don't have to do this for money, because here's the beauty is like, for me, it was like the money part ended when like, for me, the top of the top was like, I can go to a restaurant and not look at the bill. Like that to me was like the top. Like I don't need anything beyond that. And I haven't. And that happened in 2022, for example. And so it's like, since like early 2022, it's like that reality has been true for me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I no longer do it for money. I do it for other reasons. That's what keeps me hungry and keep me motivated. Keeps, both myself and Rachel motivated at the end of the day. So that's how we got into franchising. We said, how can we expand faster so we can help more people at the end of the day?
That's amazing. Garrett, I think what's so amazing about that is that you realized that what life was really about for you, your business, was serving a much higher purpose. And you operate totally different when your strategy is a higher purpose and you're serving others versus just to serve yourself and make more money. Because like you said, I mean, you could have opened the company on locations. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with people that want to do that or they're motivated by money, but you just operate at a different frequency when you're really there to serve others. And the business gets to grow so much deeper and richer. And the culture also is different when you have a team that adheres to that same belief and believes what you and Rachel believe, right?
100%. We have a saying internally, which is give first with no expectation in return.
Beautiful.
And you would be amazed at what that does. So it's like, what does that mean? We give to our employees, like, we'll set aside XYZ amount every month and just be like, I'll show up with Starbucks, or I'll show up with just out of the blue. Like, I don't even know what's coming. Here you go. That's what that would mean at like an employee level, at a storefront level for them. It's like, hey, just like, we actually have a system internally where it's like, how often are we just giving out free services to our members, or just honestly people in general, when it's the right timing? And so we actually have a metric that we track of like, how often are we giving stuff away?
Yeah.
Because like, that's actually like, it's just funny when you don't equate giving with like expecting a return. It's actually even that much better at the end of the day. Because what's funny is the more you just give, the more you actually just get, especially the more you just truly say like, I'm just going to give. Like, I'm just going to give. With
no expectations in return.
That's the key difference, is like, I'm just going to keep giving. I'm going to give so abundantly, so much that would almost be unreasonable, because that's in my control. I can just keep giving. I can keep giving so abundantly, so much to where it's almost unreasonable that things probably wouldn't come back to me at some point in the future. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to give.
I love this. I could talk a whole hour about this, because there are so many entrepreneurs that go in with the mindset of, you have the dollar signs kind of dancing in your eyes about how big I can make my business. But there's a huge differential when you run a business with the abundance mindset like you have. and Rachel has, and you've created this culture versus a scarcity mindset, because there are people listening to this right now. They're going, well, I can't do that. I can't give all this away. I might not get it back. But when you live freely the way you do in that mindset, it's incredible on having that faith that you do get it in return and 10 times back to you.
Yeah, it's very true. And obviously for myself, like I didn't come out of the womb thinking this way. Like
Of
I
course
obviously had
not.
to go through experiences to shift my mindset from being scarce of like, I'm going to punish an employee because they made a mistake versus like, hey, we were able to get another swing at that. We got to learn from this one. We can go get the next one. Like there's going to be that next opportunity out there. And like, obviously like just switching from scarce, like this is the last time, we're never going to, get out of this again, to like, oh, we have multiple swings at the bat. We have multiple customers we can treat. We have multiple franchisees that are in the system that we can find the right ones.
Mm-hmm.
That mindset will allow you to win, in my opinion, in all facets of business.
Well, let's talk about the franchise itself and you attracting the right kind of people for your culture. Garrett, who's your ideal franchise owner?
Yeah, that's a very easy question at this point. I would say that would have been a harder question to answer about a year ago. We grade on core values first, meaning like if I recruit Frank in Tampa, the first question I'm asking in my head is like, do I think Frank has what it takes from a core value perspective? Like how closely does he align with us on the mission of serving in Tampa? Because like, I'm not gonna be in Tampa. So it's like, I got to make sure he has the right lens to do things in a way that would represent this brand well. And it's like first is like assessing values at the end of the day. And so again, our values are like, do you give first? Like what's the evidence of that in the past, right? Another mantra of ours is be the expert. Like how embedded are you in your thing? Like, is there a track record of you growing? So for example, like in the corporate world, we look at individuals of like, have you tracked through? So like if you're on the marketing side, have you gone from marketing coordinator to marketing manager to marketing director or anything like that? Like, are you moving up the ladder because you're becoming more of an expert at your craft, if you will? And so we can really grade in the beginning on values at the end of the day, because it's like, there's so many rules out. Like you can't run a company on rules. Like it's just impossible. Like, you can run one with a framework, which those frameworks are just values at the end of the day. And that's how I can trust and know that, whether it's Frank in Florida or it's Brittany in New York, like they're going to operate with the right lens, the appropriate lens to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's first and foremost what we look for is like, do you have an alignment with our values in our systems at the end of the day? But then, some of the subcomponents of that are going to be like, hey, are you going to come in and just own this thing? As in like, are you going to be on the boots in the ground running with it and learning it? Entrepreneurship is hard at the end of the day. Like
Sure.
Anyone that's listening to this right now, like it is very difficult. If you've never done it, like it will test you for sure. It will test your fortitude in whatever you do. Like it doesn't matter if it's a cryo business or a law firm or whatever. There are hard things in all businesses
Great.
at the end of the day. And so when you have hard things, then it makes it that much easier when you have those hard moments to say, at least I like what I'm doing at the end of the day. And so a core component of ours is like, are you absolutely passionate about this? Because there's so many ways to make money out there. So many ways, right? You could open a dog wash place. You could open a car place. You could open, again, a law firm. And so it's like, what's the why beyond money? It's like, look, we're going to obviously help you with that component. That's important. Like we can't serve people if like you can't keep the doors open. So that's a core value of ours, right? We want to help people. So money is important, but like, is it the primary driver? If it's the primary driver, you're going to lose at the end of the day because they're going to have hard days. You're going to want to quit, whereas you're not going to want to quit when it's beyond the money. And so behind the values is obviously assessing like, why are you looking at wellness? What makes you passionate about this? Was there something that happened in your life? Is it because you saw someone else transform? Like why? Why this? Like out of anything, you could open a burger place for anything. And so we keep getting a little bit granular from there of like, so passions, core values. And then again, like we're not going to, so obviously if you love it, you're going to be in it and want to learn it. So in other words, we don't do, absentee owners or anything like that. It's
Sure.
like, I want you on the boots, on the ground running. Now, that doesn't mean you're buying a job. That just means in the beginning, I need you to learn all of it, A to Z. So like, and the only way you can do that is actually doing it. So we have a minimum requirement of like, you got to be in the store for a minimum of the first 6 months at a minimum before you can bring in a manager or anything like that.
Okay. Hands on.
You can't lead that manager if like how can you do a good job if you're like, I have no idea about this business. And so they honestly all tie together ultimately. But, I want to be in there running values at the end of the day.
Cool.
Are the big things we look at.
And you guys are growing. So granted, we only have 2 franchises open as of the time of recording this here in both Boise, Idaho, and Chandler, which is, Phoenix. But I understand you've got 9 in development with 30 awarded in the next 3 years because, as you mentioned, the key expansion model for you is through multi-unit franchise operators, right? So everybody but one is a multi-unit franchise operator. So is that a requirement now moving forward as you open new locations, or is it really based on the territory?
So it's not a requirement, but it's a logical decision for both parties, if it makes sense. And so it has made sense for 90% of our franchisees that have come on board. So we asked the question, right? We said, hey, franchisee in let's call it Tampa, right? I'll use that example. This is clearly an area with adjacent markets and adjacent territories where it makes sense to expand. You're looking at a brand new brand such as us. Therefore, you are taking on elevated amounts of risk by doing so versus like another brand that has 100 plus, 200 plus locations open or whatever. Like they just got more doubt. They just have more time under the bar.
Sure.
And so if you are wanting to take on more risk, we want to be able to give you more reward in return. And so the only way I can de-risk it for you is, hey, let's partner together. I will obviously, we're setting aside territories for you. Obviously, I'm taking in those initial franchise fees on the front end for a multi-unit purpose, but then I can go build you a better mousetrap for you to actually win at a local level, right? So I can go invest that in custom dashboards. I can go invest that in custom software solutions. I can invest that in people that make your job easier at the end of the day. So it's honestly just a value exchange. And again, we look at,
Absolutely.
Obviously, we work with Fran Fund, for example, and anyone that is trying to franchise. Fran Fund is fantastic to like hand your candidates to evaluate. No, they don't pay me or anything like that. They just have been really good. But like they report back to us and we get a look and say, hey, like, yeah, Sally up in Minneapolis or whatever, like financially, it would make sense for her. And so it's like, you either shouldn't do this at all because you don't buy into the brand. That's fine. Like if it's too much risk for you, don't. But like you're in a good position where it's like we can mutually partner together. I'll set aside these three for you because it's super early, but in exchange, and obviously like you have more upside in the future as a result of that. But then also I get to de-risk it for you because like again, I don't need the cash, but like I can just build you something better with more cash and more capital. So it's honestly just a value exchange, and that's why it's been 90% of the time it's made sense. But again, in those 10% cases, like one is in St. George, Utah, for example. Geographically, if you've never been to St. George, it's just like it vanishes into nothing after like you leave that town. So there's like nothing for like another 3 hours, right? It's not a big market like Salt Lake City or whatever, right? So it didn't make sense for that individual. And so that's kind of how we assess multi-unit. It's like it's ideal for both parties, but like not really. That makes sense.
Okay. Garrett, what's the investment range to open one unit?
Yeah. So as you know, totally varies on the market.
Sure.
You're looking at like Houston, Texas, for example. You're going to come in probably around 650 to 700. LA market, about $1 million. Build outs are crazy. And that the majority of that cost is build outs. The second line item in there is going to be equipment. So all the equipment that's housed in all the rooms. And the biggest variance on, if it's super high or super low has to do with the real estate, right? So to build out a 2,200 square foot space versus like a 2,800 square foot space, which is just totally dependent on what's out there, like it will cost more inevitably just to open a 2,800 square foot space. There's more build out materials. There's more rooms to fill with equipment, etc. So some of it depends massively on what site ends up being out there.
Sure.
That's obviously a bottleneck. So
the ideal footprint size is the 2,200 to 2,800 range then?
Yeah. So ideal footprint is really between about 1,900 square feet at the lowest side, if it's a rectangle, all the way up to about 2,700 square feet. And again, we'll work it out on like if there's a golden goose, right? That's in an amazing spot at like 28 or 2,900. So, but yeah, that's the general range for the concept size.
One of my favorite questions I ask every guest, I think, is no matter how long they've been in franchising, it's like, what has been your biggest surprise since franchising? You've been doing it for a little more than a year now, I guess. So what's been your biggest surprise since franchising for a little over a year?
I said earlier in the podcast, we said, hey, it would be unethical for us to not share this with people. And again, it's what got us over the hump. And we're like, we know this is going to be hard. And so it's like, I took in the idea of, we know this is going to be hard. I will say, I think we have made it even harder because we got to learn a big lesson along the way, which is like, the role of the CEO is ultimately to bring people on, which I did not understand earlier. I bring on the people and the people build the business. And I didn't understand that concept for a very long period of time. And so it was me ramming my head and to try to make things happen. And so it's like up until even recently, as we brought on new people and whatnot to grow the opportunity, to grow the system and whatnot, there was definitely a lot of hard moments of like, you're in 16 different places and whatnot. And that's my own fault. I think unfortunately, I got to take on mentors that, I got to point to me and be like, Garrett, like you're you're missing the ball here. It's like you have this capital to like invest in people. Like that's your job. Like go invest. Like the challenge is in entrepreneurship, you're constantly unlearning things that reinforce you to be successful earlier, right? So in the beginning, it was like I have to do everything. I have to learn how to market. I have to sell. I have to retain customers. I got to be in the store, and then at night, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. You learn that lesson. You're like, oh, that got me there. But to get to the next level, it's like, whoa. That's not what it's going to take. You got to actually back up and say, maybe I should listen to people that are in front of me.
Right.
I've been there and done it, and all telling me people, like you need people. And it's like, And so the biggest lesson in franchising for me this far is like, get more people on your team, build the people even ahead of what you anticipate at the end of the day.
How big is the team right now? The corporate team?
Yep. So right now I act as the CEO. My wife is the CMO. She has a marketing manager under her. I have a full-time franchise development coordinator under me. And I also have a full-time executive assistant at this point. The executive assistant's brand new, like still in onboarding right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is the size of the corporate team. Obviously a lot of extensions of vendors and whatnot too. Brand Fund's an example. Build Zoom on general contracting negotiations, stuff like that. But yeah, as far as like the core team, there's about 4 of us right now.
Who's the next big hire for you guys? What role needs to be filled next?
That's an interesting one. It's honestly a debate on whether it makes more sense to hire a director of operations or director of marketing. Like we can kind of see both angles. We would say we have more expertise on marketing because we've been acquiring customers for so long. That's where a lot of the attention is, acquiring customers at a local level and investing in infrastructure there. But there might be that opportunity for someone else out there that, has been doing it even longer than us. Like we've been going for 6 years. There could be someone out there that's been going for 15 years. And so we're honestly in a toss up right now. There's a great book, Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. So we're right in the middle of time audits right now, of looking at okay, last 40 hours last work week, what am I spending my time on at the end of the day? And then being able to associate, is that, does that give me energy? Am I good at that? Do I love it? And is it high value and intent? He talks about it in his book quite a bit. Or is it like something I hate, resent, etc.? And so to be honest, it's like, I love both ops and marketing. And so that's why it's a toss up right now of who is that next hire? It's not fully sure yet, but it's definitely one of those roles.
Well, if I'll give you my 2 cents, with 9 more franchise development, somebody's going to be involved in operations. Somebody's going to be doing it, and a lot of it. And with 30 more award over the next 3 years, just with the existing franchise owners, operations and franchise business coaching is going to start playing a real pivotal role really quickly with your brand.
No, I appreciate the advice there. That will definitely help give me some weight on that side. That's kind of where we're leaning, but not sure yet.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to start growing really, really quick, and franchisees are going to be clamoring for that support. And I know you guys can do it, but there's only so many hours in a day. And if you're going to lead the company, somebody's going to have to be really seriously dedicated to operations. And I'm a big believer in trying, if you can afford to, hire from top down. I did not do that, unfortunately, when I started my brand. I know I didn't know to do that, and I didn't have the wherewithal financially to be able to do that. But if I do it all over again, I would probably bring a director of operations in where you are right now and hire from that top down, operationally speaking, where they can do a lot of the business coaching, and then they can start hiring business coaches underneath them, because you're going to be growing pretty quickly, and you don't want to get too far ahead. We have too many franchises out in front and you can't support them.
Yeah, 100%. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's actually one reason why we paused our pipeline.
Good for you.
We sold our first 11 to an amazing people. Love everyone on our team. And again, they really model our core values. So really excited to see them launch in their local markets. But then we paused and we said, hey, I don't have the capacity. I still have to learn. And so we actually paused our pipeline of adding candidates into the system or considering people. So right now we're not evaluating or considering anyone intentionally. So we can just really nail these first 11 and make sure they're all doing really well. And it's right now, I know I'm the bottleneck in our business to some extent, because I have to just hire more people, and the director of ops would probably allow me to reopen up and reconsider the pipeline at that point.
And that's a great point, because we never want to really stop the momentum of franchise development. I can speak from experience is that when we pause a development, sometimes it's really hard to get that momentum and get that rock rolling down the hill again. So to be able to have somebody in operation so that you can keep franchise development going is going to make it flow so much easier. Again, just my opinion. I'm only one person, but
but you clearly done something right. So I appreciate the advice.
Oh yeah, no worries. Garrett, what trends are you seeing in the industry, and how do you try to stay ahead of it?
I chalk this up to a story on anytime I tell franchise candidates, they ask the same question all the time, right? which is like the industry in itself is kind of like how, the burger industry was in the 60s, right? So you had McDonald's, you had Wendy's, you had, Burger King, and they all were able to just kind of go on the same corner of each other, right? Because there's so much market demand
Sure.
for a burger concept, if you will. And they were all able to supply customers, right? You fast forward from like the 60s and 70s to like today, right? There's a gazillion burger chains out there. And the best is winner take all, right? So Burger King's on their decline, right? And others are taking over like a Five Guys or like a Shake Shack or whatever. Wellness is the same idea right now. It's in its very early stages in terms of what we call or classify modern wellness, right? So in other words, when we're using equipment to elicit a wellness response in humans, right? We're just break it down to that. So there's really only a handful of big players in the industry right now. Restore Hyper Wellness, which opened their 200th location last year. They started franchising their concept in 6 years ago, and they sold out all their territories as they expand. So they're definitely like the ringleader. They started 3 years earlier than us back in 2015. Right behind them is another brand, iCryo, a little bit smaller, but they're definitely second in the industry in terms of most similar to us and whatnot, in terms of multimodality wellness technology. They've got about 50 locations open right now with another 300 sold. And then everyone else is really in third place, us included, like everyone else. So there's like Pause, there's, Pause Infrared Sauna Studios, there's Perspire, there's these other brands that are a little bit smaller. They're still getting their feet wet. So that's where we're at right now is we're not in the burger wars yet, but we're going to get there in the wellness wars, right? We estimate based on data from McKinsey that in 2030, that is approximately the time in which the market will have been really saturated with wellness concepts. And it has to do with what they're predicting in terms of the amount spent on, sick care is expected to go up 1.3x if you look at their data. The amount of spend on proactive preventative care from 20, this is, by the way, this is from 2020 to 2030, is expected to go up 10.6x, 10-fold from 2020. And so it's like, fortunately, the market is getting bigger as well. Like as time keeps going, more and more people are going to adopt being proactive rather than reactive in their health. But as a result, everyone sees the tailwinds of that and they said, let me jump in. And so really the industry is still in its infancy, honestly, overall, with tons of room to grow. At the end of the day, like lots of players coming right now. For example, we went and opened up in Boise, right? And there's a Restore 10 minutes away. I mean, neither business felt any impact from each other, obviously. Like there's lots of people. Like these are two businesses that, see just a handful of people ultimately, right? So there's way more room to grow, very much early infancy stage still right now.
Cool. All right, Garrett, what's your long-term vision for the company?
Yeah. The challenge with that question is like, it's good to have a goal, but I'm not married to the goal, if that makes sense. So I mentioned earlier in this is like, I don't care about the money. I already got my thing, which again, my thing is being able to not look at the bill on a restaurant tab, right? So like I got that. That's my thing, right? And so like, if it's not a financial metric that you are trying to tackle, then like, what's the reason for a goal or whatever? To me, it's just to give a vision or a track of like, where I'm at, where do I got to go to get there? And it's more of like fitting the puzzle pieces together. It's kind of fun as an entrepreneur of like, what are all the people that are required to make this happen? What can we accomplish? Like if I'm 85 years old one day, which I will be, and I look back, like what will I have been proud of at the end of the day, right? And so that is why there's a goal. It's not tied to money at all. And so that allows me to not take shortcuts at the end of the day and say like, we have to get to X by Y date because I said so. And it's like, probably not. So for us right now, we have our first soft goal of 100 units open by the end of 2028. That would be our goal is that in the next, let's see here, that's about 4.5 years, that we get 100 units open. And that is a big, it's a big challenge. It's honestly awarding units to the right people, very easy. That's not hard. But getting them open, whole nother story. Like there's a lot that goes into that. And that's absolutely, I see it as a disadvantage in the beginning, but a competitive advantage as time goes. Because like once you get into your local market and you have real estate, it is so hard for others to get in there too. Like there's so many things out there. So it's kind of a disadvantage in the beginning that turns into an advantage later on.
Garrett, what are you seeing now as the build out time for Rise?
Yeah, man, we'd love to keep it under 9 months, but I'll tell you, the build out itself doesn't take very long. That's about 12 weeks. From the minute you get permits to the minute you open kind of thing. So about 3 months. Where all the time is honestly getting the real estate. It's a very competitive retail market. Yes, office died down like because of COVID and whatnot, but the retail category is just, booming. Obviously, like the franchise world in general is just more explosive. There's more people jumping into it. And so when you have more people, you have more demand for retail suites and whatnot throughout the country. And so right now we are really at still record lows when it comes to inventory on the market for retail. So that's the biggest bottleneck. And usually that component there currently, and this is from data from our vendor that we use on the real estate side, it takes on average about 4 to 5 months from a big picture perspective just to even get a lease signed. And that's like from a national perspective with over 2,000 data points of leases signed with this vendor. For us, it's taken about 5.5 months. There's some challenges with like when you join a new concept, which I tell our new franchisees this, hey, like we have to sell ourselves to these landlords. We have to show that we're going to provide value into the marketplace. Like we're the small guys right now. We're the small fish in the pond at the end of the day. So you got to really sell like the value proposition of Rise. It's not just, hey, here's a check, take my money. It's like, how does Rise contribute? Because it's like you're competing with, Starbucks that wants to open their, 35,000th location, if you will. And it's like, what's the landlord going to pick? They're always going to pick Starbucks over us, especially now. But like as we keep going, it'll get a little bit easier. But for now, it's like there's a lot of work that's required, and that's where most of our time's invested on the franchise development side. And fortunately, I have a great vendor that represents us to help us with that. But nevertheless, it is challenging because it is such a competitive market out there. And that's definitely the biggest bottleneck right now.
Okay, fair enough. Hey, Garrett, if someone was interested in learning more about Rise Modern Wellness, where would they go?
Yep. So you can just Google Rise Modern Wellness franchise if you want, or you just go to risemodernwellness.com/franchise. Take a look at everything. We put everything on there from, the cost to open, visuals, what the stores look like, what it's like to run a store. We try to put a ton of content on there. We're only going to keep adding more as more stores open to really paint a picture and attract the right people in. So
great. All right, cool. Garrett, one last thing. I always finish every podcast episode what I call the franchise tip jar, because the community is so generous with sharing information. So is there a piece of advice that you would give me if I was an entrepreneur that wanted to franchise my concept? What would be some tip or trick or strategy you'd suggest before I jump into franchising?
Yeah, I'd give 2. One of them I gave earlier in the podcast, which is it's your job to build the people and the people build the business at the end of the day. So it's like, who are you going to recruit? Instead of saying, what am I going to do? Because again, that's what we learned as entrepreneurs in the beginning with our 1 store or 2 stores or whatever. Instead of that, you got to shift from what am I going to do versus who's going to do this. Who Not How is a great book in regard to that. So that's one mindset shift. The other that I would recommend is just shifting anxiety, which is just inevitable with entrepreneurship, shifting that thought that you have in your head to, I just care a lot. Like that's it. Meaning like, this is not a bad thing that I'm feeling anxious right now.
Right.
It's just that like, actually, I just care a ton. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. Because entrepreneurship is stressful and like, it's a mental game at the end of the day. And anytime I found myself to do that, I'm like, man, I'm feeling like really overwhelmed. There's a lot going on. I dial it back and peel back the onion of like, oh, it's okay to feel this way right now. It's just because I care so much. There's nothing wrong with me because I feel anxious or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And so it's about winning the mental war so you don't self-sabotage at the end of the day as you keep growing in the entrepreneur journey. So those are the two big tips I'd give out there.
That's great advice. It's the way I look at it is that there is a very fine line difference between being anxious and being excited. They both can look the same, but they're radically different.
100%. It's all about how you frame it.
Absolutely. Cool. Garrett, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. Great job. And I look forward to seeing you guys continue to grow.
Yeah, appreciate your time too. Thanks so much, Frank.
Thanks, Garrett. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.